morning, everyone. In this video, we are going to tackle about special education versus mainstreaming versus inclusive education. But before we proceed, let us identify first the objectives. First, on how to utilize appropriate classroom accommodations that maximize learning opportunities for special education students. Second, understand the legal concept of least restrictive environment and that all educators share the responsibility of providing an appropriate education for special education students. And lastly, be able to respect all diverse students and model a positive attitude towards all learners. So what is special education? It is a form of learning provided to students with exceptional needs such as learning disabilities or mental changes. And also, the inclusive education is an educational practice that places students with disabilities in a general education classroom along with typically developing children under the supervision and guidance of a general education teacher. So how about the mainstreaming education? Demonstrating education, it is the practice of placing students with special education services in general education during specific time periods based on their skills. At this point, we are going to compare the three. What type of learners does each have? Okay, for learners in special education, students who are not part of the classroom. In inclusion education, all same-age peers or learners are in one class regardless of ability. And also in mainstream education, the selected learners are included in a general education class based on their readiness instead of their age. Next question, how does the curriculum looks like? For curriculum in special education, strength-based and needs-based in individualized curriculum. In inclusion, general education curriculum. In mainstreaming education, learners may having access to both general education curriculum and a more individualized curriculum. How about the assessment of education? Assessment and evaluation in special education, mostly strength-based, but I'd sometimes also standard-based. In inclusion education, norm reference, and lastly in mainstreaming education, both norm reference and strength-based. How is the learning placement and delivery of service? The learning placement and delivery of services in special education is that the services happen inside the special education classroom, but other services such as therapeutic interventions may be interested into this setting or delivered separately. In inclusion education, all services happen inside the general education classroom. Lastly, in mainstreaming education, receive services in both general education classroom and outside through the use of resource rooms and therapeutic programs. What is their philosophy? The philosophy in special education, learner-centered. Some learners have very specific needs that may not be appropriately addressed in a general education classroom. In inclusion education, rights-based. All learners have a right to access quality education that is available to others. In mainstreaming education, preparatory and integrative, learners are given access to general education but will need to catch up on skills first. Part of what needs to occur when creating cultures is to also determine distinction among framework and practices. Most important in this scenario is to understand how different special education, mainstreaming, and inclusive education harm from each other because special education accesses, instructs, and values students individually and intentionally. This type of education setting is beneficial to those very unique As well, mainstreaming education shares similarities with inclusion that special education both look at integrating the child with additional needs in a general education settings.